Hey, good morning, everybody. We'll give people a few more minutes to join, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, I'm still seeing a few people joining here. It's 10:01. Go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We've got looks like 37 people attending, so that is great. We really appreciate you taking the time to see our presentation today, have a discussion about some new things that are happening in public works and development services. My name is Jeremy Keene. I'm the Director for Public Works and Mobility, and I'll be introducing our team here in just a minute. I'm just going to hang out for another couple of minutes. I'm still seeing a lot of people joining, so let's let everybody get into the meeting. Ross, while we're doing that, why don't you go to the next slide? So this is a Zoom webinar. If you're joining by laptop or computer, please use the raise your hand function. If you're joining by phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. What we'll do is at the end of each section, we'll have an opportunity to stop and ask questions, have a little discussion. So we'd ask that you hold your questions until that point, and then we'll acknowledge you and bring you into the meeting. If you're on your computer, we'll acknowledge you by your name and ask you to unmute and ask your question. If you're on your phone, we'll acknowledge you by the last 4 digits of your phone number, and you'll have to also unmute your phone. All right, next slide, please. We'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, my name is Jeremy Keene. I'm the Director for Public Works and Mobility. This is the team that is on the panel today and has worked on the new Public Works Manual and some of the new process improvements we're making. They'll introduce themselves as they speak to their sections, but with Logan McGinnis, our engineering manager, Ross Mullenhauer, our city engineer for utilities, Kevin Slovarp, who I don't believe is with us today, city engineer for surface transportation, Troy Monroe, city engineer for development review, Ida Sager, our engineering project coordinator, Andy Schultz, who's our utility engineer, Monty Sipe is our construction projects manager, Tracy Campbell is our regulatory compliance manager for the stormwater utility. Lori Hart is our public works communications specialist. And Katie Emery is our administrative service manager and keeps all the things working within public works and is facilitating our meeting today. Next slide. So here's what we'd like to talk about today. We're working on improving our process. This is a continuous process of working on it. We won't have everything perfect, but I think we've made some good strides in improving things. This is hard to do. We're very busy. We're also down-staffed due to COVID, but we think it's a good investment. We believe that having clear standards, clear responsibilities, clearly stated desired goals and outcomes will help us improve our efficiency. And what we really want to achieve is better implementation of our city strategic goals around sustainability, quality growth, and development in Missoula. And what goes along with that is ensuring compliance with regulations and standards for public infrastructure, whether it's a city project or whether it's a development project. We need to make sure everything is built for those standards. And we also have to ensure that we're in compliance with state and federal regulations. So what we'll cover today is a little bit about our new organizational structure. You may have heard a little bit about that in the last couple of weeks with City Council. We'll talk about our Public Works Manual, some key items to know. We'll go through some process updates, how we're working to have better clarity and efficiency in our process. Got some updates on utility development fees and stormwater permits and inspections. Next slide. So organizationally, we've been working for about a year with staff and city leadership to address capacity issues, workload across 4 different departments: development services, public works, parks and rec, and housing and community development. The goal here was to clarify decision-making, build in better collaboration, and establish new leadership for development services, filling the director position there, and ultimately having mission-driven departments with a shared citywide mission. And so what ultimately came out of this is a combining of the Housing and Community Development Department with Development Services. And Erin Pahan was appointed as the director for those 2 new combined departments, which is now called Community Planning, Development, and Innovation. And so that puts the policy and the current planning sections together in one department. Development Services will continue to exist as a division in that department, with the idea that we'll be able to have better continuity between our strategic planning and policy and how that actually gets implemented on the ground. So each department carries their own mission. Public Works mission is different than Parks, it's different than CPDI, but we all have a combined mission that is really around that idea of promoting equitable, sustainable, and quality development. Next slide. And this slide just shows where all of those different operations, programs, and initiatives live. Again, each department has its own set of responsibilities, but we share common goals around integrated planning, doing a better job of aligning our planning efforts between different departments and improving the way we implement those plans. Process improvements, really working on increasing efficiency through electronic documents, better use of software, more streamlined project intake, and better communication throughout. And then one of the ways that we intend to do that is through cross-departmental collaboration using a functional team model. This will formally establish review teams or project teams that include people from different departments with a clear mission and a clear decision authority on that team. We expect that that'll improve accountability. A big part of that is a project manager model where we establish a single point of contact and that person has decision-making authority in that particular process or review. Next slide. So within Public Works and Mobility, we've got a new name. We added the term mobility to our department name, which recognizes that we're bringing over transportation functions and adding that to our mission. So within Public Works, we have our four traditional divisions. We have administration, utility operations and maintenance, streets operations and maintenance, and the city cemetery. We've added a new division called infrastructure and mobility. And within that division, we'll have our transportation planning group and our engineering group. So this combines engineering that lived in development services previously with the engineering that lived in the water utility. Next slide. No, thanks. So our new infrastructure and mobility division, we have Aaron Wilson, who manages our planning group, and Logan McGinnis, who will manage the engineering group. And under each one of those, we have specific functions. Why did we combine engineering and planning together? Within transportation planning, there's a lot of work that goes on relative to developing our funding. So CIP funding or funding through the MPO that is federal funding runs through this transportation planning group. So there's a real tight connection between transportation planning and the actual work of implementing those projects. And so it made sense to us to have those exist in one division. Obviously, there's still an important connection to long-range planning and land use that transportation has to be plugged into, and we will establish those functional teams to make sure that we still have good connections with what's happening over in community planning, development, and innovation. We think this also gives us a real opportunity to look at design development, concept to construction, the opportunity to combine projects where we're working on transportation and utility projects, and better implementation of our strategic goals around transportation demand management, multimodal transportation, things like that. Next slide. So we've also we've diversified the city engineer roles. You know, one of the things we realized was that Missoula has outgrown the city engineer model, where one person can be responsible for everything and look at every project. It's just, we're a bigger city than that now, and we needed to spread that workload around. So what we've done is we've split those responsibilities into 3 different positions. City engineer is something that's acknowledged in our city code, and so it's important to have that title and authority, but we spread that to 3 different people. So Kevin Slovark will continue to work on surface transportation projects. Ross Mollenhauer will lead up our utility engineering, and Troy Monroe will be responsible for development review. And all 3 of these folks will still need to work together and support each other, but hopefully this will create more capacity in the work we do. And then we have Ida Sager, who's our engineering project coordinator, and her responsibility is going to help us do traffic control for all this. Keeping track of projects, understanding where they are in the review process should be a resource to you when you have questions and you need to know the status of your project. And then, you know, with development review, obviously there's a close connection with the work that goes on in development services, subdivisions, TED projects, things like that. So Troy's group with development review will continue to have very close coordination with development services, be physically located in development services so that they continue to have that proximity and easy access both to other staff and the public, and also working on coordinating our stage process, the engineering review process with the process for other development review projects. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ross to take us through the next section. Let's have a quick Q&A. Any questions on what I just presented?
Oh, hands being raised.
Okay. If you do have a question, if you're still trying to find the hand button, feel free to go ahead and get your hand up. We can always circle back if we need to. Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and
Okay.
Ross, you're up.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. We're going to jump to the Public Works Manual, which is what we're excited to share with the Missoula's construction community. This is our new comprehensive reference manual for all city rules and requirements regarding public infrastructure in particular. It's really focused on the public infrastructure in the right-of-way piece. So in the past, I think the regulations for, say, sewer or sidewalks were kind of spread out through a series of admin rules and policies and standards that hadn't been updated in a while, and it was kind of confusing. So we're excited to have one manual that includes all these rules. It includes the old, well, it was Mountain Water, now is Missoula Water specifications. So this is going to be our one-stop shop for any kind of public infrastructure rules and requirements. Basically, we're creating a clear, easy to find reference manual for all public infrastructure development. So most importantly for everybody here is where to find the new manual. Lori is going to walk us through how to find that.
Hi, Lori Hart. I am the communications specialist for Public Works. And Ross, can you click over to the main Public Works? So this is our main Public Works web page, and we will be doing some changing on this page as we start integrating those other departments as Jeremy described. But our Public Works manual will be there on the bottom column, or on the left-hand column on the bottom at all times. We're going to keep that there just so it's easy to find. So if you click on that, and so these are all of the chapters in here. And also on the left-hand side, we've included a quick link to the standard drawings. We're just trying to make everything as user-friendly as we possibly can. Try to find what you're looking for. Let's see. So all of the chapters are there along with their appendices. And we're still working on the actual text for chapters 1 and 2, but those will be added. And I think we're going to take those to City Council before those are implemented. So those are a work in progress. And then, so I don't know if you want to, what was next? You're going to discuss the stage review process later, aren't you, Ross?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Lori.
Okay, did you want me to go over to Engage Missoula? So we'll come back to this review stage process, but that's also in the left-hand column for a quick link. And
Yeah.
then...
I'm sorry, I got something freezing up on my screen here.
Okay.
Let me see
So
if
I think Ross was going to try to get us to the main Engage Missoula page too for the manual.
Bear with me, I'm having technical difficulties here. Something's frozen.
Lori, maybe you can talk a little bit about how we're using Engage Missoula to get comments and feedback on the manual.
Okay, yeah, when we do get there, oh, there it is. Right now it is set up really kind of centered around this meeting, giving people some background information on that, and then also a link to the slideshow presentation that we're using right now. And once this meeting is over, this page is going to be redone, and it's going to focus on comments, taking comments from all of you who are using the manual. And so, Ross, if you could scroll down to the bottom of the page. Maybe. Anyway, there's a comments. Yeah, there's comments and questions tabs there on the bottom. So we do ask that you register. It helps us. It's really quick and easy to register, but it helps us respond to you directly, and we will be monitoring this. So if something comes along, we'll try to get your answers to you and as quickly as possible. And then also we will be collecting the comments in order to implement, review and implement into upcoming versions of the manual.
Perfect. Thank you, Lori.
You bet.
So if I could just jump in, so this is the place if you have comments or questions on the manual, use Engage Missoula. It'll be our clearinghouse for those, and then we can also post responses and FAQs on this site for folks. And you know, like we said before, we see the manual as it's a working document. We will update it yearly at least. And so as we work through it, and if you find places we need to make improvements, this is a great place for us to hear those questions, those comments and questions.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. Okay. So I'm going to give a quick background on how we got to this point as far as the manual goes. Basically, this has been a big effort just to get here. And before I even start, I want to say thanks to Kevin and Ida and all of city engineering that's worked so hard on this. Even the external to city engineering people like Parks and Rec and WGM have been involved in this for a long time. So thanks for everybody for working on this. Basically, we started in fall 2018 on draft versions. By May and July of 2020. We went out for internal to the city review, and then we did an external review. Hopefully some of you have seen this, and we did incorporate those comments or address the comments we got from both those review sessions. Back in July, we presented it to the Public Works Committee, and then in October, it was adopted by council. Today, we're presenting this to the construction community, and then as of tomorrow, it goes into effect. And you might have seen that note on the Public Works website that basically says that how this will go effect is we want everybody who submits stage 3 drawings, stage 3 submittals. If you submit your stage 3 before November 18th, then we will review it under the existing rules. But if you submit stage 3 afterwards, then we're going to review it based on any of the new requirements. And we'll go through what changes. Like I said, a lot of it is the just a combination of old rules, a consolidation of old rules. There isn't a ton of new changes, but we'll kind of walk through what new changes there were. As Jeremy said, this is a living document, and we definitely would appreciate any comments on it. This is a breakdown of the chapters in the manual. Chapter 1 is basically the front end documents, kind of the contract documents. As Lori said, we don't have chapters 1 and 2 on the website yet. Those are still kind of under construction, and we plan to have those hopefully by January. You'll start to see those on the website. But these are going to be standard documents that we would use on city projects. Chapter 2 is kind of the odds and ends, any kind of construction rules within the right of way that might apply to anything from sidewalks to water mains. Anything that would apply to lots of construction projects in the right of way will be in chapter 2. The names you see next to each chapter, those were, I'd say, kind of the primary authors. So if you have questions related to any of these chapters, feel free to reach out to these people. Chapter 3 is really a process chapter. It's discussing the stage checklists. And then chapters 4, water, chapter 5, sewer, chapter 6, stormwater, and chapter 7 and 8, transportation and erosion control. Logan is going to talk about some of the first chapters here.
Hello, everybody. I'm Logan McInnes, Engineering Manager for Public Works and Mobility Department. Thanks, Ross, for the introduction. So yes, Chapter 1 is a work in progress still. This part is not done yet. Titled Construction Within the Right-of-Way. It's just going to have general provisions that are going to pertain to all of our construction projects. clearinghouse for forms and for standard contract documents. So I would say a big part of the reason why this chapter is not done yet is we want to tie these standard contract documents to the new version of MPWSS. Last time we checked last week, it's due out at least for review in December. So we didn't want to build a standard contract based on the old MPWSS document. So that's going to be a work in progress. Next slide, please. So chapter 2, construction within the right-of-way, also a work in progress. This chapter is really oriented towards contractors. So as we get through some of the other later chapters, you're going to find those are really more oriented to the design community. But chapter 2 is a lot of just general contractor and contract requirements. So again, talked about MPWSS. So we do have a set of standard mods that a lot of these are ones that have existed over the years here for the city. And so those are going to be in Appendix 2A. And then of course, once the new MPWSS comes out, we will likely need to make some more modifications to, I guess, become consistent with that new manual. So we're going to talk about permitting and fees that pertains to a work in the right of way. An example would be latecomers fees that were currently in admin rule. So it's just a process that if you install a water or sewer main and the guy across the street wants to connect a water service to it, it's a way to set it up such that the person installing the main can get a pro rata share of that investment back from those people. Again, we'll have a list of general construction requirements. We're going to update our construction traffic control requirements. For example, we're going to clarify our 48-hour and our 14-day notice requirements. And the next section's going to have a lot of provisions about construction contracts for public infrastructure. So, like Ross has talked about, that's any utility main or, significant street improvements that maybe change alignment and grade. Those kind of things are going to be public infrastructure. And that, that'll be on like our projects, our CIP projects, but also on privately funded subdivisions that are building new roads and utilities. And we're going to talk about bonding, warranty, and insurance requirements. So a lot of that stuff will be standard. We haven't necessarily worked out this language yet, but it's, like I said, that's a work in progress also. I talk a lot about pollution controls. And then of course, there's more with erosion control later in chapter 8. And then a big part of this is going to be surfacing removal and replacement and pavement protection. So for example, asphalt cut line, we're going to specify you have to cut 12 inches outside of the limits of the trench. And removal of concrete will be at a construction joint. Next slide, please. Also working to clarify our easement requirements, encroachments, what we're going to require for use of the city-owned right-of-ways. Mountain Water, Missoula Water have always required pre-construction meetings, and I think a lot of people have found them to be valuable, but they really have only been focused on water improvements. So our intention at this point is to require it for all public infrastructure, and hopefully we're doing it all in one meeting, so we're not wasting a bunch of people's time. But we're developing a standard template that'll talk about surface improvements and all the utilities. So that's the objective, is to have one big pre-construction meeting for a project before it gets started. But we recognize there might be multiple contractors doing different parts, so we're going to, it could require multiple meetings, or we're going to work around people's needs. But I think there's a lot of good conversations that we have at these pre-con meetings. There'll be a section on ADA and accessibility compliance. So form inspections are no longer required, but city staff will conduct them if requested by contractors. And then building division staff will be conducting inspections of ADA and accessibility on private property. And lastly, there will be a section on cold weather construction, and it's it's looking like it's going to resemble MDT's cold weather construction policy. So that's it for chapter 2.
Okay, I'm Ida Sager, and I'm here to talk about the Chapter 3 improvement plans. And I have probably worked with many of you, and I'm glad to see the attendance here. So if you have any questions, please be sure to email me, or you can email the engineering email, as I can distribute any questions that we have out to our group. So some of the key items to know for the Chapter 3 is that the city intends to, as Ross had mentioned, that any stage 3 submittals that were received prior to today, and including today, it will fall under the old guidelines and specifications, whereas anything submitted tomorrow will be under the new stage process. The applicable version is dependent on when the public infrastructure was submitted. Once again, as I said, so usually I try to get those distributed within the day or 2 days, and then we've given them probably about a 1 week to 2 week lag time for the review process. Chapter 3 improvement plans, we've identified there's 2 distinct categories, and one is the site development project and the public infrastructure projects, where the site development projects include the new public infrastructure for utility mains for water, sewer, and stormwater, and street improvements established by alignment and grade, etc. Whereas the public infrastructure projects include the public and private utility projects, surface improvement projects, the city subdivisions, applicable county subdivisions, TEDs, and that anything that will be constructed within the public infrastructure and other projects that affect the right-of-way. We've added a section on circumstances and process related to design deviations. And what if you do require a deviation, we require that in writing. And the project leads and the city engineers of Ross, Logan, and Kevin, and Andy and Troy will determine whether or not the deviation is allowed, as long as it does not conflict with the condition of approval and it's based on sound engineering practices. Another thing to note for the improvement for Chapter 3 is we've identified the MFU requirements, and they are included in the Appendix 3 of Chapter 3, and they're called the MFU requirements. And our lead on that is Andy. So if you've got any specific questions, he's our go-to person for that. And it's to ensure that we review this with DEQ and MCA requirements. Ross will be walking us through the stage process, so you can hang on to any of your questions there, and we should be able to address the stage process when Ross gives us a walkthrough.
Hi, Logan McInnes back here to talk about Chapter 4, the water system. This is incorporating the existing Missoula water standards, our standard drawings, and a variety of guideline documents that were on the Missoula water website. They're probably still there, but they're going to get taken down immediately because everything is now in this document for your one-stop shopping. So we've got updated requirements for plans and design reports. We're specifying what type of drawing scales we want to see on plans, and that's going to pertain to all public infrastructure drawings so that we can see an adequate level of detail on the plans that you're providing to us. Section 4.2.5 is a wet utility main best practices section. It pertains to water, sewer, and storm. Water is kind of the first section that you come to of those, so that's why we put it in here. An example, we've struggled with, how far do you make somebody extend a water main? So we're going to say that mains have to be extended to the far side of a property being served if there's a new hardscape proposed. If it's if it's not under hardscape, then we would allow you to extend just to the midpoint of the property, which is kind of been a longstanding water utility requirement, but this will apply to sewer also. And just in general, we don't want we want mains to be in the street, not under curbs and sidewalks, or within 10 feet of street trees, or within 5 feet of sumps or sump rock. And we get that that can be difficult. We've actually been talking in DEQ, they are still requiring deviations for those situations. So we do probably still need to work out what the requirements are going to be for deviations, whether just insulation or flowable fill. So that's something that's kind of hot off the press because we were just talking to DEQ in the last day or two. The water system. So we've never had a formal utility service area. We always had a wastewater service area. And so we've made the decision that we would be willing to serve water and sewer basically to the same boundary. So it's any property in kind of what was formerly the wastewater utility service area now would be eligible for water or wastewater service. There is a URL there in the presentation. And Ross, why don't I think you can click on that, right? Sorry, I kind of sprung this on Ross. But I just want to show you kind of where the map is, what it looks like. So there's a disclaimer you're going to have to check on, I believe, every time you log in. We want basically to say, yes, if you're in the boundary, it doesn't guarantee you that you have service. If you're in a floodplain, also, points out that you have to pay all relevant fees and provide whatever main extensions are required to serve your property. But this is a nice map because you can zoom in to the parcel level and you can see whether a parcel is in the utility service area boundary or not. So thanks, Ross, for bringing that up.
No problem.
I think the last thing I want to point out about the changes to the water system is we get a lot of people that are tearing down old buildings in this town and wanting to reuse 70-year-old leaky water services, and that's not something that we think is a good practice. So this is a new requirement that if you have a service line installed prior to 2000 that you desire to reuse, you're going to have to pressure test it. And if you're talking a 2-inch or smaller, there's no accessible valve at the main. So that usually means you're going to be digging up at the corp stop and closing that corp stop just to do a pressure test. So, in our view, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put that kind of money into pressure testing a 70-year-old line. But that option is there. If the line's not leaking, we would allow you to reuse it. So that's all I had for chapter 4. There's of course a lot in there, but it really very closely resembles the old Missoula water specs that I think most people here are pretty familiar with. Thanks.
Thanks, Logan. Ross Mullenhauer again. I'm going to talk about the sanitary sewer chapter. Like I said earlier, this is really a consolidation of the existing rules. I think the biggest change that hopefully a lot of people are excited to see, I know I am, is the updated standard details for sewer. I think there's been some frustration in the past when we send out our standard details and then we ask you to change them. So hopefully that has all been addressed. I think, there's issues that come up every week about, whether a concrete collar needs to go on a manhole or something like that. And I think that's going to be a lot more clear now based on these standard details. So I definitely encourage all the consultants to check those out. A couple key changes with the standard details. The city is moving towards bolt down watertight lids. And then we're also no longer requiring flex joints outside of manholes. We also added, so we beefed up our technical specs for city-owned lift stations. We've moved kind of, in the recent years, we've moved away from Gorman Rupp and we've kind of moved towards flight pumps. We've also beefed up our force main language in there. And finally, we're seeing more E1 systems. Those are the LPSS, low pressure sanitary sewer. On those systems, the part that the city cares about mainly is the force main, because that's what we're going to end up owning and maintaining, whereas the homeowners own the individual E1 pumps. Anyway, those force mains are mentioned now in our specs, and we expect you to comply with the other regulations for just as a standard force main, as well as DEQ 2 has a chapter, or I think it's an appendix about these as well. And that's all I got on sewer.
Hi, I'm Andy Schultz, utility engineer. Thanks to everyone for being here. So chapter 6 is probably where we're going to see some of the largest changes to design standards. We're moving away from that one dry well per 10,000 square feet to a more design-based approach. So just quickly, a little bit of history. In April, the City Council adopted a stormwater utility code. This was necessary to ensure that the city was meeting its DEQ MS4 requirements. It also helps ensure that the infrastructure that the city is accepting is functioning properly and can be readily maintained. And then finally, it'll help protect Missoula's sole source aquifer, rivers, and streams. So chapter 6 and then chapter 8, which we'll discuss in a minute, takes that stormwater utility code and puts it in a format that everyone can use to design functional stormwater systems. So a couple of highlights to go over first. We've got a checklist to help owners and developers, consultants determine what stormwater design submittal their project will require. So projects are broken into 3 categories: low, medium, and high. And these are tied to the design submittal requirements. And this checklist that you'll fill out as part of the stormwater piece is also the checklist that will be required when you submit for permits. So there's going to be some consistency between the design and the permitting construction pieces. Some medium and high priority sites will be required to submit stormwater plans in a report. We also added requirements for the treatment of the first flush of stormwater to remove pollutants. This is pretty standard MS4 type of stuff that we just haven't been doing consistently. So I think we can jump to the next slide. So here's some key items to know, because they may have impact on scoping costs or project timelines. Low priority sites, which are generally single family homes, they have a list of requirements to meet. They don't require a report, but some key items will need to be provided on the site grading plan, and you can find those within the chapter 6. Next, there's a requirement for infiltration testing and geotech analysis for projects proposing to infiltrate more than 8,000 square feet of impervious area to ensure the proper functioning of the infiltration infrastructure. So this is a big change. And I know a lot of folks have already been going through this, but yeah, we've formalized it in the manual. Another thing to know is there has to be 4 feet of separation between the bottom of an infiltrative surface and groundwater. So in areas where high groundwater is suspected, there may be requirements for seasonal groundwater monitoring to determine what that depth is. So that can really have an impact on project timeline. And then another big change is the city will accept and maintain stormwater infrastructure in the public right of way. Otherwise, the stormwater facilities will be privately maintained. That hasn't always been the case. For projects that propose to discharge stormwater off-site or have pipe conveyances, they'll be required to provide a private stormwater maintenance covenant access agreement and an O&M manual, an operations and maintenance manual. We totally understand that there are going to be some projects where some of these requirements don't make sense. Something that comes to mind is a small infill project in the middle of Missoula where dry wells have worked and functioned fine for years. Therefore, as Ida mentioned, we do have a deviation request procedure within chapter 3. So those can be submitted. They'll be routed through city engineering and will be reviewed and approved or denied based on the best information presented and known at the time. And then next slide. So finally, chapter 6 in particular has numerous brand new requirements, and we understand that it's a work in progress and that will need to be changed. We've kind of already talked about this, but we really want to work with you guys and want your feedback to make sure this works for you. So for example, we've realized that the last table in the chapter, table 6-5, isn't very practical for a typical dry well installation. So we're working on a revised table for that already. And so that you can see that below there. So these are big changes, and they are going to require more work and more efforts. But I hope that we all keep in mind that the intent of this chapter is not to have more requirements for the sake of just having requirements, but to instead ensure that we have long-lasting, adequately functioning stormwater systems that both protect our aquifer, rivers, and streams. So again, want this to be a collaborative process, and to make this happen, I really look forward to working with all you towards that goal.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. So chapter 7 is transportation systems. My name is Monty Saib, construction project manager with Public Works and Mobility. So like many of these other chapters, a lot of this chapter entails or includes consolidation of current admin rules, standard drawings, and municipal code, including the recent changes that we took through council on Title 12. Some of the changes or additions that we did add a lot of reference documents to the front end of this chapter, including active Missoula 2045, NACTO urban bike design standards, and the Uniform Vehicle Code, for example. And we deleted the addition dates on these and made a note that the city will adopt the most current version of all these reference documents. These are guidance documents that need to be looked at in relation to the other standards we have in chapter 7. Like other chapters, we clarified the plan submittal requirements. So we added some clarification, additional detail to what's required for surface submittal requirements for plans. So we incorporated requirements for when traffic impact studies are necessary. This is something that was kind of referenced in the subdivision regulations prior to this, and I think that's about the only time or only location they were found. So we did include them in chapter 7. It specifies the required analysis and considers the mitigation measures that are necessary from that analysis. And if we can go to the next slide. So site visibility requirements will now follow AASHTO, or the American Association of State Highways and Transportation Officials design requirements. This is for intersections. Design consultants will have to calculate these intersection site distance per AASHTO on projects where new or existing but modified intersections are being proposed. Our driveway and alley approach standards will still fall under our current visibility obstruction guidelines. We provided minimum standards for streets and required geotechnical reports if requesting a deviation from these minimum standards. So once again, there's a table provided, and it provides for the minimum standards. It includes language from subdivision regulations regarding circulation patterns and connectivity. Requires complete multimodal transportation, which would include pedestrians, cyclists, and transit. And then lastly, we've added a section on street lighting standards to include location, materials, and height. This is something that we kind of addressed on a project by project basis prior to this. And it addresses operation and maintenance of new lightings, and requires that will go through an annexation into an existing street lighting district, an SILD, creation of a new district, or other equivalent means as approved from Public Works. And we've been having some conversations on lighting districts and so forth. So I think there'll be some further information on that here in the near future. And we also in chapter 7 make reference to the park standards design guidelines. So although that's still a separate document, there is a reference to that. And so you'll still need to look to the Park and Rec design manual for certain aspects within the public right of way. That's about all I have.
Concerns construction stormwater management. And again, like Andy mentioned, incorporating our approved code into the manual. So some of the biggest changes here is that formerly we were regulating the same thing that DEQ was, as far as an acre or more of disturbance would also require a city SWIP permit. We are now requiring a permit that disturbs 2,500 square feet or more. Sites that do this will now require best management practices, or BMPs, on site to prevent erosion and control sediment. So this new stormwater permit replaces the current city SWIP and the current grading permits. And that permit process will be discussed in more detail at the end of this presentation. So the importance of this is that BMPs must be implemented to prevent sediment-laden discharge off-site. That's a big thing we kind of see sometimes on these smaller sites that don't seem to be regulated under the DEQ SWIP, end up with a lot more track off in the roads and off-site. So we need to prevent that. And all of this is for compliance with our state and federal regulations, with the conditions in the city's MS4 permit, the Montana Water Quality Act, and the Federal Clean Water Act.
Any questions from our attendees?
Katie, I did see a hand up previously that may have gone down. Stan, did you still have a question?
I think I answered that in the chat for him. Nope, he's good.
Perfect, thank you.
I'll go ahead and answer a question that was in the chat box about, the question was, will individual lots that are part of a larger subdivision be required to have a SWIP? So that's a good question. I think if we've seen in the past that sometimes when lots are sold off, that those can be removed from a DEQ SWIP. And if that's the case, if they're no longer covered under a DEQ SWIP, then they would have to get our city SWIP. Otherwise, if they're still part of the larger common plan of development or covered under a DEQ SWIP, they would also be covered under the city SWIP. Hopefully that kind of made sense, if you understand what I mean. So yeah, I mean, the purpose of the city SWIP covering smaller areas of disturbance is to sort of get around that DEQ loophole where projects could be removed from the DEQ coverage. So if it's already covered under the DEQ SWIP, if it's not removed from that and it's still part of the DEQ, it would still also have a city SWIP that covers all of those lots.
You have another question in the chat. Somebody is asking us to have the link available to the utility map for the boundary.
Yeah, we can send that link out. I'm not sure. We can maybe, Lori, can we post that on the Engage Missoula site after this meeting? I'm not sure why the link in the presentation didn't work.
Sure, I'll get that up there.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any other hands.
Okay, I guess we'll move on. There will be time for questions again at the end of the presentation. Oops. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section of our presentation, which is all about the public infrastructure review stage process. And that is a bit of a mouthful, so let me break that down. If you're a developer or an engineer and you have a project in mind and you need to get it through the city process, it's a public infrastructure in the right-of-way project, or let's say it just involves any kind of public infrastructure in the right-of-way. This could apply. This process is replacing the old process that was called it's not replacing, sorry, we're updating what used to be called Proj Track, Stage Process, Development Toolbox. It kind of had a lot of names depending on who you talk to. So now we're trying to give it a name that really informs you what it's for, which is for public infrastructure review, the stage process. public infrastructure review stage process. It is a mouthful, but in the past, I think this process has been it's been confusing for a lot of people. I know the engineers. We're trying to make this, our goal with this process now is to really streamline the review process as best we can and eliminate any kind of bottlenecks, as well as increase efficiency for both the city reviewers and the consultants. We did spend some time updating the checklist. So when you look in the manual, they are part of chapter 3. I think there are the appendices for chapter 3. You'll find the new checklists. That's what we'll be expecting any consultants to use when they submit these new stages. As Ida correctly loves to point out, and I put this bullet on here just for you, Ida, because it is very important. Please use the project number on all email correspondence, just to help us keep track of things. Okay, and then we also wanted to kind of create a roadmap to help you through this process. So this is our roadmap, and I recognize you probably can't read this on your screen, but it will be included in the manual. It's appendix 3D, I believe, in the manual. And this is more of a draft roadmap right now. I think this is kind of how we envision the process, and we haven't completely perfected all the parts of it. But I do think this is important for anyone who's trying to see how a project moves through the city review process, to understand. We basically, we've updated some of the titles for the stages, and I'll get into those in detail in a second here. But some of the new things you might not be familiar with are that stage 1 is now, let me back up a second. The previous stage process was really written for subdivisions. And then we've tried to cram in all kinds of any kind of public infrastructure projects. We've kind of take this process still applies for subdivisions, but we also rewrote it so that it applies to lots of other types of projects as well. So every project is going to start in stage 1. That's the project development initiation stage. That stage is, I view it as more of an intake stage where we're going to get the right information that we need to understand what kind of project it is. And then we're going to assign a project lead, and a review team, a project number, and get the project moving. Stage 2, during stage 1, we're going to determine whether or not stage 2 is even necessary. We kind of view stage 2 as a 30% review level. And so on a larger project, let's say a riverfront triangle project or a large subdivision project, I think the engineers would probably want some feedback at the 30% level. So that's why we put that in there. If it's a smaller project, a simple main extension, we don't need to waste time on a 30% review if the engineers don't want it. So then stage 3 is pretty much the same as it was before. It's a 90% review. Stage 4 is our 100% review. Stage 5 is the final walkthrough and inspections. Stage 6 is final inspections and acceptance. And then stage 7 is warranty. If you get a chance, it would be good to update yourself with this chart. We did try to lay out some of the basics for each stage, such as the prerequisites, what the intake process should look like, the submittal requirements, and then what our basic city actions are going to be for each stage. I think one of the key things to know too is that during stage 1, you'll be assigned a lead engineer, and that might be myself or Troy or Logan or Andy or anybody. And that person will really be your primary point of contact. At that point, we still want to keep coordinating with Ida, the engineering project coordinator. She'll help shepherd us through this process as well. But we want to have direct communication between the lead engineer and the consultants or whoever is on the developer's rep side of things. And let's see what else. I think in the past, there's been a lot of confusion about letters that the city might write. An example might be the intent to serve letter. versus the DEQ approval letter. So this roadmap clearly states that what we call the intent to serve letter is something that we do in stage 1. That's my understanding is primarily needed for subdivisions or projects like that, where they want to know if the city would be able to serve them. But the capacity or availability letter, as it's been called in the past, it's really a letter for DEQ approval. That comes in stage 3. So those kind of questions, or let's say easements. Easements are another good example. Those kind of questions about easements. When are easements required to be signed versus recorded? This roadmap, I think, will help spell out some of the details for that. Okay, I'm going to just briefly go through the different stages. Again, like I said about stage 1, this is all projects start at stage 1. I think I already mentioned this about the what used to be called a sewer availability letter has been renamed as the intent to serve letter. The primary purpose of stage 1 is really for the city to identify the scope, concept, relevant planning documents, policies, and regulations, and to kind of get this in the queue and get the project moving through the process. We are still working on an intake form. We don't have those details completely ironed out yet, but in the future, I believe we will have an intake form that will kind of help this process. I would say our end goal with all this is to kind of automate this process a little better. And building permits go through an Excel automation process, and this doesn't. And so I think we're kind of working towards that. This roadmap and these improvements to the stage process is kind of a halfway step towards that goal. Stage 2, as I said, it's a 30% design level review for projects that need it. It will not be required for all projects. The city will make the determination with the consultant's input. If consultants want a stage 2, I think we would be happy to grant it. Other times we might decide it's necessary. And stage 2, we don't want it to be a very in-depth review like you might see at stage 3 or even stage 4. It's more of, we're going to look at things like alignment, connections to the areas outside your project, trying to get the basics set on your project so that we can move forward. It is a 30% review. We don't need to see details at this stage. One other point about stage 2 is, Mary McRae in the land use department has their own subdivision sufficiency review process. And so if it's a subdivision project, we would expect that stage 2 would be kind of concurrent with that sufficiency review process. We don't anticipate that engineers would need to go through subdivision sufficiency review and then go through stage 2 with us. I think we would just want to be kept informed and move forward together. We're not trying to duplicate work here. As Ida pointed out earlier, we do have MFE requirements now. Andy Schultz is kind of our lead on that, and you can check those out in the manual. Really, the point of that was to bring us up to speed with what DEQ expects us to be reviewing when we sign off on those MFEs, and a lot of it had to do with stormwater. Stage 3. This is the 90% review. We're happy to write a water sewer DEQ capacity letter. That letter says that we have reviewed the plans and approved the plans. So at this point, we want to see all major design items really worked out. We want to know that alignment and things like that aren't going to be changing after stage 3. Stage 4 is our release for construction plan review. We have added language to require a plat to be incorporated into the submission information, as staff needs to determine necessity of easements prior to, I can't even see this word. Oh, anyway, I can read this. As I said earlier, easements must be signed. Easements must be signed, not recorded at this stage. And as was pointed out earlier, we would like to start having a mandatory pre-con meeting that the city is invited to if there's public infrastructure. We may or may not attend all those pre-con meetings, but we would like to know they're happening and would like to be invited to them. Let's see, stage 5, inspection and testing. On a case-by-case basis, we are willing to grant a conditional acceptance. In my mind, this is really a partial, it should be called, it's a partial acceptance of a project. And what that means is if for some reason the surface work isn't going to be finished, let's say for a year after the utility work, but somebody wants the utility work to be completed so that you can start making utility connections, then we are willing to be flexible on that. The key really is that we want to see definitive areas of the project. We want it to be clearly defined what parts of the project are being partially accepted. We don't want it to be piecemeal. So if you wanted to approve all sewer and water utilities on a project and then wait for surface, that would be a clear distinction, and that would be considered. Stage 6, final acceptance. This really hasn't changed very much. Easements must be recorded at this stage. And then stage 7, the warranty inspection, there hasn't really been any changes to that either. Okay, any questions on this section? I think I saw something from Corey Davis, but I didn't see the question.
Corey, you should be able to talk. Looks like you are muted.
Oh, can you hear me, Ross?
Yes.
So if we are, doing a previous subdivision, hey, we've done the first 3 phases, we're moving on to phase 4. Can we skip, do we have to do a stage 1 for that? Or is that something that we can just jump kind of straight ahead into stage 3 or something like that?
Are you talking about, sorry, were you asking about like kind of a multi-phase or?
Yeah, multi-phase subdivision. Yep.
I don't know if we've clearly answered that. I think if we see the basics of the project, the overlay of the entire project at stage 1, it's a good question. I think we'd have to kind of meet on that as a group and decide.
Well, let me try that one, Ross. So
Yep.
if you've gone through subdivision, you've already done stage 1 and stage 2 because we've done sufficiency review concurrent. So phases of subdivision would, I think, start at stage 3.
Okay, perfect.
Another question from Michael W. Do you have a question, Michael W? We cannot hear you.
Mike, I'm happy to, if you email me your question afterwards, I'm happy to try to answer it as best I can too. All right, well, I guess we'll move on. Mike, feel free to email me your question afterwards. I'm assuming that's Mike Wellahan with DJNA.
Okay, no other hands are raised.
Okay. Okay, Logan is going to take it from here, I think.
All right, thank you. For those of you not looking at chat, somebody had posed a question about how to find that utility map because I think that the link wasn't working. So if you go to the Engage Missoula site Lori's been actively engaging Missoula while we speak. So she's got a link up there now under important links on the right-hand side. Or if you go to chat, there's a URL in the chat that'll work for you too. So thanks, Lori. You want to move to the next slide, please, Ross? Okay, here to talk about the utility development fees for water and wastewater. So you probably all know that over the last several years, we've engaged in facility planning and rate studies that we started in about 2017 and are really kind of wrapping up now with the rate studies. So the rate study included potential development fees to fund growth-related capital improvements. So both facilities plans for water and wastewater have identified significant capital needs for the system. You know, in the example of water, we've got water tanks, we've got new water supply wells that are needed. And so we need a source of funds to help the city grow. As far as the rate studies for user fees, there's already a new flow-based wastewater rate structure that was approved, and it's going to be implemented starting in February. So, you know, commercial has always been billed based on water usage, but now we're moving to all categories being billed on water usage. So residential, for instance, will be billed for wintertime water usage. And then, you know, this is not a change, but it's just a reminder that different strengths of waste are billed differently too. So if you're doing food service, it's a different charge. So I think everybody needs to be thinking about that when they're designing buildings and getting, you know, if multiple meters are needed in order to separate out the charges, then, you know, we'd like you all to be thinking about that. So this water and sewer development fees will be going to the city council for a public hearing on December 7th of this year, and then final action could be taken on December 14th. So there is lots of information available at engagemissoula.com about the proposed utility development fees. Next slide, please. So I just want to put up this next two charts are what the proposed fees are. So this is the proposed water development fee. So a reminder, there's never been a water development fee here in Missoula. So this is brand new. So just kind of just pick one example, starting just after the first of the year, you know, your standard 3/4 inch meter, which is now our minimum meter size, no longer are installing 5/8 inch meters. The proposed water development fee will be $1,777. And then you'll see we're requesting 3 years worth of increases that are, they're a few percent a year. So that's what this table is showing you. Next slide, please. And again, you know, we've had wastewater development fees for many years. This is just a, I guess, proposed update. And so again, the minimum meter size, 3/4 inch, the new minimum fee after the first of the year will be $2,163. And then again, 3 years worth of small increases will be, well, we're requesting that they approve them so we don't have to go back every year. So again, if you want to learn more or you want to contact the city council, the information is available at engagemissoula.com. Next slide. Does anybody have questions about the proposed water, wastewater development fees or the new rate structures? Now's your chance. I will point out that if multiple meters are needed for a building, you know, ideally we have separate shutoffs, you know, separate lines for each meter. I mean, we're trying to be flexible. There are examples where somebody wants to put a brewery and a restaurant together and they, you know, multiple meters are needed. So, I mean, we're trying to be flexible, but ideally we would have separate shutoffs for every meter to count. So I guess that's kind of our standard, is a separate shutoff. But if the building's not configured that way, we can certainly entertain requests for deviations on that. So, but something to be thinking about as you're designing buildings. All right, I don't see any chat or hear about any questions, so I guess we can move on.
All right, Tracy Campbell again. We'll go over a little bit about the new stormwater permits, new ones that are required now and that we're looking at implementing in January 2021. So like we mentioned before, the permits are in order for us to comply with our own code, which became effective in April. And everything that we're doing isn't meant to be onerous or cause any headaches necessarily, although we understand it might. But it really is to comply directly with the conditions of our MS4 permit. If you have any questions or concerns at all, please always feel free to reach out to me, and we can I can help explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. And in order really just to comply and so that the city can be in compliance with the regulations. So one of the first permits is a dry well approval. This is a $129 permit, which is obtained under an excavation permit. And so who will be pulling this permit? Usually it would be the excavator operator. Whoever is pulling the excavation permit would also fill out this form. For maybe some larger projects, if it's not the operator filling out the form, they may have a consultant that's filling out the form for them for the project. So this became effective October 1st. And it also requires, or we're also pointing out that a class 5 injection well inventory form is also required to be submitted to the EPA. And so filling out this form for the city does not relieve you of that duty. We do not fill out that form to the EPA for you. You're still required to do that. And that is because our dry wells are regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act, in which the EPA has primacy over that federal regulation. And it's because our dry wells in Missoula discharge stormwater to our sole source aquifer. And then, so next page. The other permit that we're having is called the stormwater permit, and that is for construction stormwater management. So it is combining the erosion control and post-construction stormwater into a single permit. And so how that, it's based on development type for the fees, and those fees will be reflected in the engineering fee schedule. And that I think is being worked on right now. I'm not sure if those fees are live on that schedule or not, but they should be reflected on there. And if they're not, if you have questions, again, please reach out and make sure that information is on there. The process requires a site evaluation form. That's probably one of the first steps in the process, and that's what's going to help determine your priority ranking for the project. And based on your priority rank is whether or not you will be required to submit a stormwater management site plan for post-construction stormwater management controls. So the sheet here on this slide is showing what that priority ranking worksheet looks like, which is part of how you fill out your site ranking. So this is going to be required for any site disturbance greater than or equal to 2,500 square feet. Again, we'll need to, these sites will have to implement erosion control BMPs during construction. So I want to clarify, really we should probably say erosion prevention. That's really the key point here is we want to prevent erosion. Secondary, we want to control sediment. So preventing erosion means leaving a vegetated buffer on your site, staging, phasing your project so you're not mass grading and disturbing a whole lot of area at first. And then secondaries are things like silt fence or inlet protection. And next slide. We can move slides. Oh, there we go. Thanks. And so the second part of the stormwater permit has to do with how we're managing post-construction. So the first part, looking at priority with the site evaluation form, is talking about construction BMPs. And then anything that ranks as a medium or high priority site must also prepare a stormwater management site plan for any of those post-construction stormwater management controls. And what that means, we'll be looking for a storm drainage report, maintenance agreement, O&M manual, geotech report when we're looking at infiltration. And we will want to say, though, actually projects that propose to infiltrate, evapotranspire, or capture for reuse all post-development stormwater on site without piped conveyances do not require a maintenance agreement or O&M manual. So the fees for post-construction priority, the fees for the post-construction permit are based on the priority rank for post-construction, and those range from $257 to $387. The post-construction permits are renewed every 5 years. However, if you have a site that's only has construction, that can be closed out after final stabilization. And let's see, I was going to say one more thing. I think as far as some of that post-construction, there was a question on who would be filling out kind of the post-construction. And so a lot of times that's going to be more for the construction permit filled out by the contractor or builder is usually who's going to fill out those permits. And then it's transferred usually to an HOA or the owner for post-construction. An example of a permit, one of the questions came up to provide an example of a permit that doesn't have post-construction. Well, likely we're talking about some of those smaller sites, maybe in a subdivision. So that individual lot maybe was pulled out of the bigger SWIP, the DEQ SWIP. And so it's no longer covered under the DEQ SWIP. So then we have a local permit for that, but likely that site would rank as a low priority because a lot of their stormwater management controls would already have been addressed within the larger subdivision plan. So in that case, that would not require post-construction. So any kind of site that's a low priority does not require post-construction site plan. All right, thank you.
So that's really the end of our presentation. So any questions about anything now are welcome, or comments.
Russ, let me jump in. There was a question on chat, which I answered, but I don't know if everybody's seeing chat. Ron, it was a question about how will sewer development fees be determined in the county for contract sewer situations? So, we require a fixture unit count to be calculated and a meter size determined based on that. And then we actually do require a meter to go in because of the wastewater rate structure is based on metered water use. So we don't own the meter, we don't provide it, but we provide contact information for Northwest Pipe, who provides our standard meter that our AMI system can read. And we're still testing to see how we're picking up reads out, say by the Y, but that's kind of our goal, is to be able to read that in an automated fashion. Obviously, we don't want to be metering the irrigation, since we don't want to charge you for that on your sewer bill. So the water meters should be, downstream of your irrigation system. So that's how we do it. We base it on fixture unit counts and actual meter size. Any other questions?
I just want to thank everybody for attending. I know it's a big, chunk of time to take out of your day to do this. Staff has worked extremely hard on this. I think it's good progress. We're open to your input. We're committed to trying to work more effectively together to get important things done for our community. So thanks for taking the time. Thanks for making the investment. And as always, we're available for your questions, comments, and suggestions on how we do it better.
Okay, there's a question in chat before everybody hangs up. Maybe Andy, you want to pick up that chat question?
Yeah. So Zane, I think we're open to some interpretation, but in general, if all the water is contained within the site, you're not proposing to discharge at all. Then I think you can show that you've treated that first ½ inch of runoff. That's going to change as we move forward and move into some more LID green infrastructure scenarios. But for now, I think that works. If you show that you can't do that, I think we can refer to that post-construction BMP manual that's put out by DEQ, and you can calculate the runoff rate and compare that to your infiltration rate and make sure you can meet that first ½ inch runoff rate. They've got the formula that in there in that BMP manual. So as long as you can meet that with your infiltration rate, I think you're fine.
Andy, do you see this question in the chat above from Dustin? I think you mean about stormwater. Is that correct, Dustin? Can you
I
provide?
think Tracy already answered that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
A question, I think it's from Dustin, about would the city consider, let's see, statutory review timeframes for each stage in the review process to provide a rough timeline for projects? I mean, maybe Jeremy wants to weigh in. I think our goal is to make the stage process more streamlined. I think, we're providing more resources where we've got new folks available to help review things. So certainly the objective is to speed up the review timeline. Whether, I guess I'm not going to say we'd commit to statutory timeframes at this point, unless Jeremy wants to say otherwise, but that's our objective, is to reduce those timeframes.
Yeah, we want to make it more predictable, but it's hard for us to commit to statutory timelines because we can't control the workload. So, the volume of work that comes in is going to affect the timeline that it takes to get through the process. So, what I think we can do is give you better expectations on how long it's going to take, depending on who's in the queue, how many projects are in the queue. So, you should have an expectation of when we are going to be able to review your project. It may not be on the schedule that you're hoping for, but we will certainly try to do a better job of telling you when that can happen and how long you should expect it to take. Yeah, so question on posting this PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will be on the Engage Missoula site, and then this is also being recorded, so you can, if there's anybody that did not make this meeting, wants to go back and review anything, there will be a link on the Engage Missoula site to the recorded presentation as well.
Thanks for the FYI, Andrew Mill. I'll check that out and see why it's not numbered correctly. Did Corey raise his hand again?
Believe so. Are there any other questions from our attendees? I am not seeing any more questions.
Okay, well, seeing none, let's go ahead and sign off. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks to everybody who presented today. Really appreciate your work, and we'll carry forward. Be safe out there.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thank you.